I'm Barry Farber, and this is Diamond Minds, Performance Under Pressure, how people push the limits. We're going to look at sports legends, entertainers, business leaders, brain surgeons, billionaires, all of them who've broken through because they didn't fear failure. They didn't fear a setback. And we're going to look at the four corners of a diamond: mind, body, food, and fitness. How do we perform at our best? Well, we're going to take a look at all different kind of people. And every day, you have to make sure you're training your brain. You have to make sure you look at ways to, what if I'm blindfolded? What if I'm blindfolded and doing the speed bag with heavy rings on or whatever it is? Because did you ever close your eyes and wonder how blind people even get around? It's just scary, but you're training different parts of your body that have never been trained before. And then all of a sudden, guess what? When you take that blindfold off, you perform 10 times better because you've got the feeling, the sensory, and together it's crazy. But you must think of ways to break down something so that your training is different, unique, and you're not just training every muscle, you're training the mind, how the mind thinks and works. You have to try things different because you go on a different path and you'll learn great things about what you can do inside you. That's where the diamond in the rough becomes the diamond mind. I am so excited to have this next guest. He's a world-renowned neurosurgeon. He's a Hall of Fame wrestler. And you know what? He operated on 30,000 people in life and death situations. Do you think he knows how to deal with pressure? He's going to share his thoughts and ideas in a life-changing book called Cognitive Dominance, a book about how you deal with fear and overcome it. And there's nobody better in the world than Dr. Mark McLaughlin to share those insights. Dr. Mark McLaughlin, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And look at him. He's right. You're right in the operating room, right where you perform the best. You look great.
This is my element right here.
So let's start off like right into the meat, okay? So most people you talk about diamond minds and performance under pressure. How do you perform under pressure? You understand what fear is, false evidence appearing real. And our mind is more important than anything else in dealing with fear. What are some of the key strategies that you've dealt with over the years, especially, I can't even explain what it was for a family to be able to, what you tell them and how you operate under that pressure. What are the key things to eliminate the pressure and improve the performance?
Well, when I talk to my students about this and I talk to the cadets up at West Point or whoever I'm talking to about performance enhancement, I start with it's a process. You're not going to just come out of the gates and be completely fearless and be completely, devoid of nervousness or anxiousness. You have to, give yourself a break. It's taken me 20 years to look at an operation the way that I do. But I do think I've learned a number of key lessons along the way that have helped me. And I think you can pick them up sooner than I did. So, one of the things I talk about to the cadets and the students is rules, routines, and rituals. You got to have them. Every area of medicine, and particularly neurosurgery, has a lot of rules. Never cut what you can't see. Always leave a drain. Never worry about a patient alone. If you're struggling, get more exposure. And all of those are sort of technical terms, but they really are allegories on life. So never cut what you can't see is a really good one, because as long as I'm operating and when I put my scissors down somewhere and I'm about to cut some tissue, I better know everything that's between those two blades. And it's a good rule of thumb to just stick with. But it's also a rule for life, don't make a decision. Interestingly, the word decision comes from the word cut. It's a Latin root. So decision is a cutting or a branch point. And every decision you make, you need to make with as much information as you possibly can. And don't make that decision unless you have everything you need and know in front of you.
So there's certain situations where I hear what you're saying, but how prepared? People go to meetings to have a meeting about a meeting, and then all of a sudden they're preparing and then they never take action. There are times when you've taken action where you can't have all the information because it's a new unexplored territory. How does that work?
Absolutely. There are curveballs that you can get thrown at in the operating room and in life. And, I think again, sticking to some basic concepts of being yourself, of not worrying about what other people are going to think about your decision, of not worrying about what other people are going to think about what your action is, and really falling back on your basic principles. I mean, whenever I'm stuck with a tough decision, my question is, okay, Mark, you're a servant, right? That's my role in life. That's my purpose. And
What do
so
you mean by
how
that?
can I be of service? Is there any way I can be of service in this event that is going to make it better, is going to ease suffering, is going to calm somebody, is going to alleviate the problem? I want to be useful and a source for improvement in a situation. So that's how I approach an unknown situation. And then the second thing is really, and we'll talk more about this, is you've got to be in the present moment. You cannot be thinking about, what could happen in the future. You have to be thinking about what needs to be done next, right now.
Mm. Do you know there's William Danforth, the founder of Ralston Purina, had the greatest quote. He said, be your own self at your very best all the time. And that's very hard to do if you think of it. Be your own self, because people change. They want to be liked by somebody, so they adapt away, but they're never truly themselves unless they. So explain that to me about what you just said about be who you are, your own self, to make a difference in what your profession is or anybody's.
Well, first of all, I love that book too. He wrote a wonderful book. It's an old book,
Mhm.
and I highly recommend
I
that. I think it's called,
I dare you.
is it I Dare
I
You? That's
dare.
right. Oh, I
The
love that
best.
book.
I can't believe it's the first
I
time we're
love that.
talking about it. It's awesome.
I love that book. So, I guess I'll break it down to a situation. So everybody, life is a series of interruptions. We have a plan, and then something interrupts that plan. And many times, that interruption uh, induces some anxiety because it's an unknown, and it gets in the way, or we think it gets in the way of where we want to be. And
Mm.
you need to really assess these events, whatever those interruptions are, and again, fall back onto who you are. So, I talk about an event where I was about to do a difficult operation at the end of a day when I was exhausted, and a couple of things, early on before the surgery started were concerning me. The surgery was delayed, and I had gotten some bad news that my father was sick, and I was really considering that my mind is not right, and I need to probably postpone the surgery, cancel it. And what I did was, I had to go in and talk to the patient and tell him I was going to cancel the surgery. And as I started walking towards him, there was just something that flipped in my mind that said, your dad's sick. He's really sick. He just got a diagnosis from his doctor that was, a cancer diagnosis. And I wanted to go see him immediately. And I was really upset about it. And I thought, am I going to tell this man right here that I can't have his surgery? Or am I going to do, what my father, would want me to do? And that is take care of the person in front of me first before I go see him. And so I realized that, I need to figure out a way to turn this turn of events into something positive. And what I did was I dedicated the surgery to my father. I said, I'm not going to throw in the towel. I'm going to make this surgery a monument to my father. And after I finished it and it went amazingly well, I went up and I told my father about it. And it was the greatest gift I could give him was that, hey, Dad, I had this situation today and this is what happened. And what I realized is that I initially was afraid. I had fear of something bad happening, of me not performing the way I could be, of not giving this patient my very best. But the thing about fear that we have to remember is that it requires the future. Fear does not exist in the present. And when I began thinking about my father and how I would dedicate this surgery to him, I dismantled that fear. I removed it. And what happened was I began to love my father more. I began to love my patient more, and I began to love what I do more. And that's what happens. That's why Fear is really the enemy of performance, and it's the opposite of love. It keeps us from loving, not just people, but what we do. And when you love what you do, you're unstoppable.
Yeah.
I really believe that.
I love that. And that is something that, yeah, moves me. I have to think of every time when I get upset, I have to think of baseball. I know it sounds crazy because it's going to interrupt my thinking here, but I've heard that story, and every time I hear it, it really goes to the point of what you are as a human, how you take your inner strength and put it to the test of fear and love. And I think that's our last guest talked about that, about love and fear. Love being the answer to diminishing fear. And that was really good. Your father was a big inspiration to you. I remember you talking about, the other day I was in my car with my son and I take out my, the squeezer. I actually sold a bunch of them for a guy who invented the one that, you squeeze together. And, at a traffic light or while I'm driving, I do 20 here, 20 there. And talk about how that influenced your life, even that little $5 item that you talk about.
I brought it today to kind of show everybody. And this was my dad's gripper. And
that's awesome.
One of them, he had many, and it ended up on the cover of my book. I remember every time I got in the car, I would hear this sound.
Clicking.
And same thing. He would, whenever the red light would be, when we were waiting somebody at the airport, whenever there was a break in the action, he would squeeze that gripper. And that sound, every time I hear that sound, it takes me back to, fifth grade, climbing in the car after practice and hearing that. And what an amazing lesson. It's funny. There's a great quote that said, parents teach kids things when they're not trying to teach them. They teach them through action. And
Right.
The lessons that are passed on by doing that with your son, Barry, too, is there's multiple lessons there. One is, like Jack LaLanne, you can work out anywhere. You can work out in your kitchen. You can do squats with the chair in your kitchen, and you can exercise, right? Number two, never waste a second of your life. There's always something that you can be doing to improving yourself. And the biggest lesson I think my dad taught me was that, he started lifting weights in 1946. He claimed it's what it got him through night law school, to not fall asleep in classes. And what he said was that physical exercise gives you cognitive energy. It excites your brain too. And because of that, we can do more intellectually. So it's really the marriage of the two: physical exercise, intellectual exercise. I tell, I spoke out at 10th Special Forces out at Fort Carson once, and I said, so you guys spend how many hours in the gym? And they said, well, we spend 2.5 to 3 hours in the gym every day. I'm like, well, how many hours are you working on your brain? How many hours are you reading and putting things into your brain to build up that cognitive reserve? You have a physical reserve, but we need to build our cognitive reserve. That helps us in the present moment, but also helps us in the future when we get older.
Every room in my house has a weapon in it. There are pull-up bars everywhere, weapons, swords, bow staff, nunchucks. I don't care. Because anytime I've got 5 minutes, I'm in that room. If I go to my bedroom, there's a pull-up bar right there. I've got to do 10 pull-ups. I've got to do 10 pull-ups on the way out. I know it's crazy. When I used to brush my teeth, I would stand like this. I would just sit there and brush my teeth, just in a horse stance, just to get my legs, why waste time? It's 2 for 1. They say chop wood, it warms you twice, right? One, you chop it, okay? You get a workout, you warm up, and when you put it in the fire, we don't realize the benefits that we can have from acting. People think you're crazy. I don't care. I was on my way here to the studio in the airport. I'm doing push-ups. I don't care. People look at me like I'm a nut. So what? I don't care. I love that lesson your father told you, and I love the fact that you apply it. A brain surgeon who is not arrogant. This guy is so down to earth. I love you. That's what I love about you. And I want to hear about talk about the fact that you went to the Wrestling Hall of Fame and D1 Division 1 wrestler, and what wrestling taught you and how you take it to the operation room. What is the transfer there?
Sure, that's a great question. I started wrestling in Millburn in the 6th grade. My coach was John Cerruto, and the Millburn wrestling program, and John Cerruto was one of the most influential people in my life. As on my grandparents, my parents, and then it's John Cerruto, because he instilled in me a discipline to do exactly what you talk about. But I think the sport of wrestling, it teaches you something about responsibility. You know, you're responsible for every action that you perform on the wrestling mat. But that's an allegory for life. I mean, I believe that I'm responsible for everything that happens to me. Uh, I'm not going to say good or bad, but what an experience might be pleasant, might be unpleasant. The more I believe that I'm responsible for that, the more sovereignty I have over my life, the more power I have over, and control over my life. And I may not even be able to figure out at the moment how I somehow was responsible, but I'll never stop thinking about it, because the more I think about it, the more I learn. So it teaches responsibility. And I took that lesson well, and I love teaching that to wrestlers. Wrestling is also what I call a fear laboratory. I mean, kids, they're warming up for a match. They look over to the other side and they see some kid who might look bigger than them, might look stronger than them, maybe appear older than them. And they've got to go out, and without anybody else there, without any other teammates in the middle of the mat in front of the gym, they have to perform against those people. And I see a lot of kids in their early ages. They have trouble with that. They have worries. They have fears of getting on the mat. And I love working with kids like that, because literally being a youth wrestling coach to me is like doing brain surgery. I have the ability to help implant in their brains positive thoughts, thoughts about what they need to focus on. Again, techniques that will help them, not just in wrestling, in life later. Oftentimes I'll talk to them about focus on the basics. Okay. I know he maybe looks stronger than you. I know he's a little bit older than you, but just stick with your wrist control, keep moving on bottom, and control the tie-ups, and focus on those three things, and everything else will fall into place. Don't worry about the time or the clock or the outcome. Just shoot your moves. Those kinds of things, when you can get kids to buy into that, it clicks. And it clicks not only in wrestling, it clicks in school, it clicks in their interpersonal relationships. And then you see the kid the next time they come in the wrestling room, they shake their hand, your hand, they look you right in the eye, and you're like, oh, yep. I connected with this kid. I really connected with this kid.
You get me fired up. So I took my son at 12 years old to my sensei, who is black belt martial arts Hall of Fame. He's a phenomenon. And he said to my son, I took to him, and he goes, why are you here? So my son looks up at me and goes, don't look at your father. Why are you here? And he scared the hell out of my son. But the long story short here is that my son was taught, because he was a baseball player, and I wanted him to take martial arts and utilize that for baseball. Like you just talked about things, stick to the basics. You never have to go back to them. The basic fundamentals in wrestling, you're using in surgery. So I see the transfer of that. So my son he'd say, I want you to go up to bat. I want you to stand before you go to bat. Don't even look at the pitcher. Just stand there. And when you get up to bat, I want you to look at the pitcher in the eye and say, give me the ball. Like he's saying this to my son, give me the ball. And he's saying, that's what I want you to look at him like you want that. Come on, let's go. Don't you hide behind the plate. Don't be afraid. Get in there and say, let's go. And put fear in his eyes. Nobody else is there. It's just you and him. And I can't tell you how amazing the transfer was to baseball, where people said he wouldn't be a baseball player, and he played college baseball, captain, home runs like crazy, but he trained like a lunatic. And what you're talking about right now is brilliant. I would love to see how you can look at this brain we have. And people say we have a brain internally here in our stomach. I hear that now. A lot of people say, your gut is also a brain. But I want to hear, how can you share with people, since fear blocks more people from success than most things, what goes on with fear and the brain? How can you train the brain to be able to be less emotional about a situation, so that you're focused like that on the event and in the zone like that? What is going on with the brain? What can you teach us?
There's so much wisdom that you just spoke. Technically, I think there is part of a brain in the abdomen, because there's a nerve that comes down from the brain called the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve it's a large nerve that comes straight from the brain, and it comes down into our digestive system. And 70% of the vagus nerve is what we call impulses that go from the body to the brain. So when you say like, oh, my gut tells me something, it does tell you something. It really is your vagus nerve telling you, warning, watch out, there's something going on here, or there's something that doesn't match up. So your brain extends into your gut very, very powerfully and effectively, and that helps guide you. And it was extremely effective when we were cave people and living around when it was very dangerous to go out and get food and to go get water, and we could have became instead of making dinner, we became dinner. So that's the most primitive part of your brain, called your amygdala, which is really it's your smoke detector. It tells you, watch out, there's something going on here. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's hardwired. That's your 1.0 brain system that that's always going to be there. And it tells you when something's important. But we have this brain 2.0. We have this frontal cortex, which can outthink that fear. And that's a lot of what I talk about in my book, is how do we rise above that, take the information that we're being told, because sometimes it's very useful. If you're walking on the wrong side of a sidewalk and there's somebody coming along, and your right brain intuitively sees that this person's walking an unusual way, and you might be in danger, and it's time to get on the other side of the sidewalk. That's really important to know. But most of the time, there are false alarms, and we need to modify that. And so again, falling back on the basics. And what I tell my wrestlers is, it's the best wrestler doesn't win the tournament. The best athlete doesn't win the competition. The athlete that performs the best wins the competition. Big difference. We see most talented athletes in tournaments not win the tournament all the time. So it's important to be aware of it and to understand that your body is sensing signals around you at all times. And then you need to interpret them. But I think if we make decisions out of fear and anxiety, generally those decisions they're not effective decisions. They're not when we're at our best performance. And so it's important for us to dismantle it. And we dismantle it by recognizing the harbingers. Am I thinking about something in the future? Well, how many times have I thought about something in the future that never happened? Am I thinking about somebody else's opinion of me? I talk a lot about judgmentalness. If there's a difference between judgment and judgmentalness. Judgment is really important. I better not cross the street right now because the traffic is too heavy. That's a good judgment. Okay. But judgmental, that person's, not a good X, insert the blank. That person's not a good surgeon. That person's not a good person. That's a judgment. So that's something where I'm assessing somebody, and my affinity to that person, my regard for that person is diminished. That should be eliminated. That gets in the way of performance. Just do what you need to do, and don't worry about what somebody else is thinking about. Just do what you've been trained to do.
You reminded me of something I want to come back to in a second about our kids in classroom situations versus when we were cavemen or women just living without anything. But cognitive dominance is your life story. What are some of the lessons that really come out of that book that just really ignite people's mind to think differently?
Probably the biggest one is that we have these events that happen in our lives, and we have an interpretation of them, and we tell ourselves a story about that event, and we think we've figured it out. And based upon that event, we get judgmental. We think less of ourselves or more of ourselves. And because of that, we only tap into one perspective. Whereas the best way to live your life is to get as many perspectives as you can, as many times as you can, because then you're going to have more power to make decisions that are correct, like never cut what you can't see. So one of the stories in my book is about a little boy who I operated on, who unfortunately had a number of complications after his surgery. And for years, I blame myself for those complications. I thought, man, if I was a better surgeon, that wouldn't have happened. If I had been thinking more quickly, I would have picked up that infection earlier. If I had been more effective in heading those problems off the pass, he wouldn't have had any of those. And I just continually told myself this story that I was, inferior, that I could have done better. And so many of us say that to ourselves. Oh, I could have done better. I could have done better. It's such a miserable statement. It should be eliminated from our vocabulary because think about it. Everything we know in the future, like once we're in the future, once we're an old ourselves, we can look back on every single thing we've ever done in our lives and say, oh, I could have done that better. It's a totally useless statement. All it does is beat yourself up. It's guilt that's totally ill-founded. It masquerades as self-help, but it's not. It's just guilt. It's just beating up on yourself. So later in my career, I was so upset about this boy's outcome that I abandoned him. I basically never, he was handed off to the other doctors, and I moved ultimately and left to another town, but I never followed up with him, And years later, I ended up, my curiosity and my dysphoria of his outcome got to me so badly that I finally decided I'm going to find out how he's doing. And I looked on the Facebook and I actually found his parents' restaurant, and I found out that he was still alive and he was actually with his family and doing well. He wasn't, neurologically normal, but he had survived, and I had done my job to keep him alive and keep him with his family. And when I went up and I talked with the family, they were just so amazingly grateful of my care. And for 16 years, I was beating myself up about my care, and they were thinking that, I had saved their family. And it was just such a dichotomy of stories. One that I was telling myself that was really one small part of reality, not the whole thing. And so that was the biggest lesson I had in my book. And I learned, and it made me a much better doctor. And that was, don't accept one story that you tell yourself. Talk to people about it. Never worry about something alone. That's a neurosurgical principle that was taught to me by Gail Rousseau, who's a neurosurgeon in Washington, D.C. area. She was one of my mentors early on. Never worry about a patient alone. Never worry about anything alone. Share it with people because they're going to give you different perspectives, and you're going to be able to solve that problem better, and you're going to have a better assessment of yourself. So that was the biggest lesson I learned. And man, it made me a better physician and a better surgeon.
And thank God for all the surgeries you've done. It did. And that's a great story. Wise advisors, mentors, we all need them. My mentor, Shihan Mark Walker, is the guy who trained me and also trained my son. And I wanted to throw this at you because the brain is so maximally what they say, plasticity of the brain. At an early age, you can learn 5-6 languages by the age of 5. And I want to ask 2 questions. One, I want you to share about kids today, or what we could do to enhance their performance in life by what we do in the early years. And second, I want to ask you this, because you just brought up something about like never ever accept, talk to mentors, people around you. But I found the wisdom in books that if I found a great book, like I Dare You, like books on physics or energy by scientists, or your book, Cognitive Dominance, you read it over and over again. But then every year you go back to it, it's totally different. Because you've changed, your brain has changed, your experiences have changed. But if it isn't different, then you haven't applied yourself. So talk about those 2 things, about what we could do with kids at an early age, and then also what we could do to improve our knowledge, because we need to learn like we're going to live forever and live like we're going to die tomorrow. I don't think we have that attitude like you do.
Well, first of all, kids' brains are amazingly resilient, and plastic is the word. They have cells that can turn into different structures within the brain, and nerve cells that truly are regenerative, and more so than adults. But we're finding more and more that adult brains have regenerative capacity as well. Some of the nerve cells in the area where we smell in the front of our brain are regenerative. And we're also finding that there are these stem cells that can be located in other areas of the brain. So first of all, the adult brain is not static. It's a living, changeable organ as well. Second thing, there's new research coming out now that when we learn something or when we are challenged, it activates new genes that were previously dormant in our DNA. And as a result of which, it begins growing or sequencing for proteins. And those proteins are actually the building blocks of newer structures within our cells. So you truly can physically change your mind by challenging yourself. It's important to step out of your comfort zone and to continually expose yourself to new challenges. It works, and we see there is expansion of some areas of the connectivity of brains when you learn a new language, or when you try a new instrument, or when you take on a new physical skill. We see growth of dendrites, which are the tentacles of the nerves. But we also can see growth in literally the size of areas of the brain with repetitive activity, particularly with meditation and with reading. Also, when you talked about reading allows you to live multiple lives. It's the gateway to wisdom. And we've shown that when you read and you get in the mind of somebody else, there are parts of your brain that light up that haven't lit up before. You can grow empathy. You can grow perspective with reading. That's something I do every morning. I read books over and over again. I read Marcus Aurelius's Meditations every morning, at least a page, and I read The Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday, who's an outstanding writer. It's beautiful. And I really believe that by reading them over and over again, those words will sink into me, that those words will activate genes that will build proteins and building blocks within my brain that will be a stronger structure when I get older and Father Time meets his blows to our bodies, as we all experience. The more you can build, the more vocabulary you have, the more physical skills you have. Interestingly, there's studies on grip strength that if you take a high grip strength into old age, it increases your longevity. Similarly with balance, very important for as you move into old age, to have balance and coordination. So all of those things are important. Your brain is plastic even now, Barry. You can change it.
I'm telling you, it's really plastic now after listening to you. You're talking my game. But you know what's really strange? I find that people talk about, do we really communicate? I was talking about these acacia trees that actually communicate to their other species of acacia trees when there's a threat to their leaves, because giraffes are eating them. They send out a toxin. And what is going on with communication? And what you just talked about the brain and what we're doing. I just realized, 2 days ago, my son goes, Dad, I'm getting this book called Marcus Aurelius Meditations. I said, let's get two, because I like to mark it up. And you just talked about it. I think that I have a collection of them, and my kids say, Dad, you never read the whole book. Yes, I do. I just read this chapter and I come back. Then I read another book chapter and I come back to that one. I like to merge the best books into my brain to find out ways, because it's osmosis. It's later on that all of a sudden an idea comes to you full forward. You can't think of it, but it just comes because of something you read 2 years ago. You know what I mean? I don't know. How does that work? How does it work when you can't think of something, and then all of a sudden you're driving on a highway and that person's name comes into your brain? That's the power of something that happens inside of our mind that you can control by picking and choosing what people you surround yourself with information that goes into your mind. The selective process of your environment determines your success more than anything. And I love what you just said. And I want to go to kids right now. I want to talk about the classroom, because it's such a controversial area. I was daydreaming when I was young. My parents took me. My father was a vice principal and an educator, and my mother was a nurse in education. And they said, how come he's not listening? I'm looking out the window. I'm like, maybe the teacher's not interesting. I don't know. If the teacher's not teaching, what's going on? But sometimes we get bored, and I really have to figure this out, because millions of years, our DNA is built around you know, flight or fight, you know, that whole premise. And what can we do with our kids who are sedentary during the day to make sure that they have the ability to build the brain, the connections early on? Because that's where I find there's a disconnect. And I see a lot of videos of parents now putting their kids in nature, doing this ninja, all this work so that they're in, you know, they're outside, outdoors all the time, because we become such an indoor society. What are your thoughts on that and just insights?
Well, I've been coaching youth wrestling now for 25 years. Now, I'm not a teacher per se in terms of a classroom setting, but what I've noticed and learned, first of all, is that as an adult, you need to talk to kids as adults, not as kids. They want to be treated, I think equally in the way of conversing with them. So I know I see some parents and I see some teachers kind of talk to kids differently than the way they talk to adults. I think that's wrong-minded. I talk to kids like they're an equal with me. I ask as many questions as I can. I mean, it's really, you got to put yourself in their world. And it's hard in their world. They're being told to do all these different things. They're being told to be grateful. You can't be told to be grateful. You
Right.
have to, you have to feel the gratefulness. So these things, they're being told so many different things. A lot of them I coach both in Princeton and in Trenton, and some of my kids they're really angry, and just to find out what their day was like, to ask them like, how was your day today? And really like truly want to hear what their day was like, not, oh, that it was good or no small talk. Like I want to talk deep here, how was
Mm.
your day? How bad was your day? And get them to kind of verbalize their anger. And when their anger dissipates, and a lot of times it dissipates with physical activity. That's why I'm a big believer that, wrestling and exercise in general is really good
Right.
for kids. It lets them dissipate their anger in a healthy way, because suppressed anger is unhealthy. Suppressed anger can turn into hostility. Suppressed anger is corrosive. But anger alone is a natural experience that we all have, and if we can expel it in a healthy way, then we can focus on the creativity of life and the beauty of life. So I
Mm.
think focusing on talking to them as an equal, recognizing that they may have some anger underlying where they're at, and making sure they know that, like, I had some difficulties with a couple of my wrestlers this year. I was really having trouble connecting with them, and I just met with them once, and I just said to them, listen, I don't know how to say this in any fancy way or anything. I am only here. I only come here to make you better, to help you be who you want to be, to make your life better. And
Mm.
if I'm not doing that, please tell me how I can do that, because that's what I want to do. And yeah, sometimes I'm going to get in your grill and say, you got 10 seconds left, go for that takedown. Um, but that's only out of love. If that's not working for you, if that doesn't work for you, then tell me and I won't do it anymore. That's
Mm.
the way my coach did it for me, and it worked for me, but it doesn't work for everybody. You got to have a bunch of tricks in your toolbox, and you got to work them out.
Mhm.
So when you're not, I guess I would say my third lesson is, when I'm not connecting with a wrestler, don't blame it on the wrestler. Blame it on me. It's my fault.
Mm.
I got to do a better job for that kid. I've got to find a way to make that connection. And it's challenging. It's very challenging. But if you keep focusing on it and you keep focusing on them, you're going to make that connection, and you're going to make a difference in that kid's life.
Yep. And you're right on with that. Oh my God. And your credibility and your empathy with these kids shows right there how you manage these wrestlers and why you're so great. And John Ceruto is a great man too, who I know you mentioned in the beginning of the program. I love that guy. He's a real deal, who inspired you as a mentor. So I wanted to share this with you. So sometimes even if you say, how was your day? What did you do? It was okay. They don't talk. But what I found sometimes is like with my son, I play golf with, and we play golf, and sometimes things come up that I don't force. Or my other son will take a hike in nature and things will come out. Or my daughter will watch a movie with a bowl of olives and ice. You know, things come out when you're not asking sometimes. What do you think of that?
Absolutely. And I think we generally as adults don't ask good questions, you know.
Hmm.
How was the movie? You know, that's not a great question in general. But hey, that in that movie, you know, the let's go to the Godfather 3, one of my favorite series of movies. In the Godfather 3, the Pope says, or the priest says, you know, when the mind is unhappy, the body cries out, right? So take that and go to and say to your child, or say to your wrestler, hey, do you remember that line in the movie? What was it? What did that mean to you? This is what it meant to me. What did it mean to you? You know, or even when they say, yeah, school is okay. Wait a minute, hold on. Like that, the tone in your voice tells me a story that it wasn't okay.
Right.
Dig deeper. Tell me a little bit more. So being really, I think, attentive to the body language and asking good questions. What does it mean to you? What did that mean, you know, to you? This is what it meant to me, but I want to know, what's your inner world? What did it mean to you? Those kinds of things are important, and you can get better at it. You can work on it.
No, the question is the answer. You know, I mean, you talk about sales. A friend of mine who is the head of Rico, he talks about the fact that life is a survey. You know, when you meet people, you try to understand who they are, where they come from, ask them questions, and all of a sudden, you naturally, you know, bond with that person because you're actually genuinely interested in them. So, you know, it's probably something you have to practice too, because people are, how was your day? And then they don't know where to go from there. And that's a really good point, by the way. So, Mark, what is your definition of success today after all the achievements and maybe some setbacks there and adversity? What is it today now?
Connection every time, as much as I can, every day. When I'm walking in the office, sometimes I'm distracted, but I try to look at every person in the eyes, even if it's for an instant, and just make that connection. When I'm in an office with a patient, make that connection, eye contact, physical approach, everything that says, I'm interested in you. Just going back to your last point, I love the Matthew McConaughey, you know, I've got it written on my gym wall. Less interesting, more interested, you know, be interested. That's the connection. That's where the magic of life happens, is being connected with people. And when I'm connected with a person, I'm not thinking about something else in my mind. I don't have that discursive thinking. I'm just being myself. And when I'm being myself, I'm being effective. So it's really being interested and making that connection. That's, to me, the most success I can have on a daily basis. That's what helps me fulfill my purpose as a servant, as a doctor, as a father, as a husband, as a coach. That's what my goal is. And the more I can do that, the more successful I'll be.
Here it is, right there. You said it on the money. You know, it's funny. I ask thousands of people their definition of success on radio, TV, all these interviews, and that was the most unique one, and I'll tell you why I love it. My mentor, Mark Roberts, many years ago when I was starting in business, he says, Barry, don't forget to look people in the eye. When you're talking to them, look them in the eye. Don't look around the room. They're the most important person right in front of you. And I know that sounds simple and common sense, but common sense isn't so common anymore. People don't realize how important that is. So what you just said is brilliant. You know, your definition of success is that empathy and learning about others and look them in the eye. So, Mark, is there anything else that you'd like to share with the audience that's interesting and you feel would be a great takeaway for Diamond Minds?
Well, you know, I was thinking about the concept of diamond mines and how do you make a diamond? Well, a diamond is, you know, elemental carbon that's put under tremendous stress and heat, and it forms the diamond. And one of the concepts I love talking to my wrestlers about and my students is the concept of alchemy. The ancient science of trying to turn lead into gold, which many people thought, oh, that was at the time it was cutting edge science, but now many people look at that and look down their nose and say, oh, that's silly. But to me, that's not silly at all. I mean, I think I believe in alchemy. Maybe we're not ready to turn lead into gold, but you can certainly take something that's out of order and put more order into it. You can take chaos and order it. You can take a senseless event and figure out a way to make some sense out of it. And, in the wrestling room, I think we take kids in this, this nascent form, and they're not in shape. They're not strong. They don't know moves. And over the course of a season and several seasons and ultimately a career, we mold them into, an athlete that's self-confident, that is resilient, that is strong, that is physically fit. I mean, that to me that's turning lead into gold. That's exactly what the alchemists were after. And that's really after what I'm after with my mind. And I think what people would like to have with theirs is in seeking wisdom, to voraciously devour books and knowledge and wisdom and talk to as many people as you can to get those perspectives that we talk about, because the more perspectives you have and the more knowledge you have, the more effective you'll be in pursuing your life goals. So I do believe in alchemy. I think it's a great concept. And just as carbon turns into diamonds, we can create our minds, our diamond minds, through the use of continued onward efforts to better ourselves.
In all different ways. This has been, I don't know, the fourth or fifth interview, and every single time you come up with something so exciting and new. I love you, man. You're a great inspiration for people. I really appreciate it.
Love you too, Barry. It's great to be on. Thanks for the opportunity. You're an inspirational person for me.
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Mark McLaughlin, a legend, world-renowned neurosurgeon. I'll see you soon. So what are the takeaways with this neurosurgeon, this brain surgeon? Okay, for our normal minds here. Okay, number one, leaders are readers. They dive into information. They never stop reading because they realize they can live a whole new life. They can educate themselves by greatness that's written not just today, but hundreds of years ago. Okay, leaders are readers. Dive into that learning. Number two, mentors, wise advisors. We need them around us. Our environment is an example of our success. If we pull people around us that are always pulling us down or don't believe in things or love to tell you why things fail. You ever hear of Schadenfreude? I never knew what that name was, but it's a German name. Schadenfreude means those who get enjoyment out of other people's misery. That's why the news is so big. 80, 90% of it is negative. So just remember the fact that we need mentors who are wise advisors around us, and we need to mentor kids around us, our own kids or people we work with, because they are diamonds in the rough. They don't know what's going on. They need our advice. They need our experience to share with them. And number three is being able to look at difficulties and adversity and turn it into an opportunity, to be able to see something that most people say, oh, that's a waste. That's a total failure. And a friend of mine who was the CEO of Valpak, Joe Bordeaux, would say, you know what? That's good. He'd point to things that everybody's like, oh, the business is going to fail. We're going to go what? He goes, no, that's good. Let me tell you why that's good. Because now we have an answer for how we move forward with more intelligent action to make this better. That's how you look at things. That's how successful people look at opportunity and difficulty, where others look at difficulty and opportunity. We need to change our mindset. Those are three takeaways that a real brain surgeon has the credibility to share. Thanks for joining us on Diamond Minds, Performance Under Pressure. I hope you enjoyed the show, and may your future be as bright as a diamond.